Affordability, adapting to climate change. Thought I'd pick this really foggy morning with no sun out to talk to you about climate change. And I'm sure you've read about climate change, but what do you really know about climate change? My story started, of course, in '62 when I read Rachel Carson's book, Silent Spring. I knew then that my dad was right, that there were some real problems with how we were treating the earth. But I, of course, did not know that the climate was going to change. Nobody did back then. But I've always advocated for respecting the earth, honoring and respecting the earth. So as years went by and as protests went by and Woodstock went by and the Vietnam War and all the different things that happened over the course of time when we started to notice that things were changing. And they told us not to worry about it. It'd be 2100 before anything happened. And it kept saying that. They kept saying 2100. And I was in graduate school at the University of Arizona. And there was a notice in 2007 that there would be a talk in October. And Peck, Dr. John Overpeck, who goes by the name Peck, would be speaking, along with a whole bunch of other people. He was from the University of Arizona, where I was in school, and so was Dr. Guy McPherson, who was actually he was forest. His specialty was forest, but he has since focused his entire life on climate change. Anyway, there was to be this talk, and there were students, faculty, and guests invited. And students and faculty were invited from the University of Arizona, from Arizona State, and from Northern Arizona University. About 70,000 people were invited to this talk. I was very excited about it. They were going to bus people in. They had a big auditorium decided for it, and as they were talking to people to find out who was coming, it got smaller and smaller and smaller. And I invited my husband. I don't know if anybody else invited people. 34 of us showed up. Out of 70,000 invitations, 34 people showed up, including my husband, who was a guest. To say I was disappointed would be putting it mildly. That day, Dr. Guy McPherson, Dr. John Overpeck Peck was speaking. Guy McPherson was not there. Dr. Overpeck was supposed to have been celebrating the Nobel Prize. He won the Nobel Prize for Environment along with Al Gore that day. But he said he would rather be talking to other people. And now I really, really, really understand that. I understand that with every fiber of my being. Because at that lecture, they discussed the fact, there were several people lecturing, and everything they showed me, my mouth just kept dropping open. One of the things they showed us was that only 32% of the people in the United States believed in climate change. 60% of the people in India believed in climate change, and 59%, 1% less, people in Mexico believed in climate change. Well, at the time, we were planning, thinking seriously about moving to central Mexico for me to finish my degree, so that my husband, who after he finished in the Vietnam War and left the military, became very involved in community theater. He had been an actor as a child. And one of the things about Guanajuato is the place where everybody who is Mexican goes for vacations having to do with theater. They have a huge celebration in September every year, Cervantino. Different countries are invited from around South America, and usually a foreign country is invited to, somebody from Europe or the United States or so forth. And they put on this huge thing because they have all these theaters there, and there's always productions going on. In fact, every single night the mariachis are dancing and carrying on with their singing and music, and it's marvelous. It's absolutely marvelous. Anyway, I had gone there for summer breaks to study and was really taken with Guanajuato. I just absolutely adored Guanajuato, and I knew my husband would love it because of the theater. So we'd been talking about going there. So when we got those statistics, I said, honey, this really sucks. But not only that, the house that we had been remodeling that whole entire summer was, in fact, in an area where they started using Roundup, which was close to where we lived. And it was like somebody pierced me in the stomach or set an elephant on my chest. I just could not believe it. Shortly, we learned that 58 different heirloom varieties of corn that used to be in Mexico were devastated because of the Roundup and the GMOs. And oh man, it was just like somebody pulled a rug out from under me. I just could not believe that that was happening. So, being the academic I am, and loving to research, I got online and I had been following Guy McPherson. I knew climate change was a real issue. Nature Bats, B-A-T-S, Last is his website. Nature Bats Last. Guy, G-U-Y, McPherson, M-C-P-H-E-R-S-O-N, McPherson. I've been following him along, so I knew what he was saying about climate change, along with a lot of other people. I can't tell you how many things come into my email every day about climate change. A carbon brief, climate safe villages. I've been a member for 5 years of the Climate Psychology Alliance, both in the U.S. and in the international group. Even though I'm not a psychologist, I am a retired special education teacher, and I have done a tremendous amount of work with children. I'm certified in emotional behavior disorders, and I've taken a lot of courses in psychology. I was married to a psychologist for a whole number of years when I was very young and very impressionable, and I worked with Dr. Raymond B. Quintel, who was a very famous psychologist at the University of Illinois, where I took courses in art and art therapy. I'm really interested in art therapy. So there's a lot of psychological overlap there that led me to want to know some of the emotional aspects of climate change, where people were going on that aspect of climate change. And what I've learned over the years in working with people from all over the world, because I've joined the Climate Psychology Alliance and talked to people from Europe and Africa and Australia, South America, the United States, all over the United States and Mexico, all the different people I've talked to, and affordability is a big deal. That's a very, very big deal. And I know that doesn't sound right to you at this point, but it is. We left the United States specifically because of climate change. And the more I talk to people around the world, I know a gal who left Washington State and moved to Portugal. Everybody keeps asking constantly, where should we go? Where can we do? And there was a very elderly man, probably in his early 90s anyway, maybe even middle 90s, that I listened to at one point, who talked so much about Ecuador being a better place to go. And Guy McPherson said, Ecuador is not going to get hotter, but it's sure going to get wetter. That's what we're seeing. In fact, this past year, there have been so much rain and so many landslides that it's actually gone down the sides of the mountains, under the pavement, lifted the pavement up and destroyed pavement where there was hard top pavement. Where we live, of course, it's dirt because we're in a very rural area where the subsistence farmers live. But it destroyed our ability to get, for months, to be able to get to the big city, which is Loja, which is also the state of Loja. That's where we do major shopping, things that we can't find in the villages here. But that's what happened because there's this inordinate amount of rain that had not been here before. And it's also been very confusing for the farmers. Everybody around here knows that there's climate change. I mean, it's just a matter of life, because they can't plant. I mean, when I was a kid, you planted the corn, and the corn was the same height, and everybody harvested it, and it maybe planted twice, depending on where we're living in New Mexico, so it wasn't an issue there. But the corn was always the same height. Here, the corn is all different heights, because people plant all year round, because they never know when it's going to work and when it's not going to work, or when something's going to get flooded, or they plant on the side of the mountains and everything is just not flat. It's not like they use big combines. No, it doesn't exist here. Everything's very small scale. They use lots of burros for moving cane and anything they need to move. They also use trucks, of course, but it depends on what level of economics a person's in on what they use. But it's so common here. Everybody talks about it. And so what I hear in so many other places, like what's happened with some of the organizational groups who've essentially collapsed. That's why I'm so glad the Climate Psychology Alliance has not collapsed, because the psychologists are saying back 5 years ago that the patient was in the room or the client, and the psychologist was in the room, and they were both asking the same questions with no answers. But that's changed. There was a huge study of, I believe it was 10 countries and thousands of young people between, was it 14 to 24 or 16 to 24, somewhere in that age range, whether they were worried about climate. And oh yeah, they're sure worried. And of course, I'm really concerned about the kids, because I was a teacher. And I was a teacher of disabled kids. And of course, when Greta came out, Greta Thunberg, as an autistic child, I was absolutely thrilled out of my mind. And all the things that she's done to bring about climate awareness, and all the people who've ignored her. And I can't get over it. I mean, the young people haven't ignored her, because the young people are worried. They're scared. And I've talked to lots of different parents. I've talked to parents who the kids weren't paying much attention because the rest of the world wasn't paying attention. But I've talked to people who were very involved in climate change, and their kids were terrified. So, and of course, there's lots of young people going to therapists now because of the anxiety. And the change in the Climate Psychology Alliance whole attitude and how bad it is, and how many other anxieties have come into it, having to do with economic issues and pirating of ships and that sort of thing, and the political issues that have come up. There have been so many different things going on that have made such an enormous difference in what should have been the outlook. I mean, I lament all the time, why wasn't Al Gore our president? Why wasn't he here to prepare us and do the things that needed to be done to make sure that we were all aware? Because I so believe that if everybody did something, just anything, I mean, even recycling their plastic, or hanging their clothes out to dry, or washing their dishes, or wearing used clothing, there's recycling anything and everything, and upcycling, and there's just so many things that you can do that, just aren't that complicated. And I just feel like if everybody did something, if nothing more, maybe a tornado or a hurricane or a tsunami would come in just a little bit milder. But we keep having all these indicators that keep telling us that things are getting harder and worse, and we keep seeing it. We see it over and over again. We see more earthquakes and stronger earthquakes and more issues with water, either rain or lack of rain or whatever continues to be going on. And the affordability is a big deal because when people move, it's expensive. It's not just expensive in terms of money, it's expensive in terms of emotions. You give up an area where you live, you may have to give up a job. For us, we were retired, so it wasn't a big deal, but we moved into a foreign country. We had to adapt to different money. We had to adapt to different languages, different ways of living, finding a doctor, finding a dentist, finding people we could trust, finding people who would tell us the truth about things. I'm just trying to figure out where a grocery store is. I mean, there are so many expensive things attached to affordability. And like the gal who went to Portugal, she came back. I've talked to people who've gone to Germany. I've talked to people who've just moved all kinds of different places or are frustrated and want to move, or they can't decide what work they should take or how they should change their lives in order to skirt whatever's going on with climate change. And it's really, really sad to hear there's so many things that people are trying to do. And then, of course, the frustration of young people when you hear about how angry they are and they feel like we didn't do anything and we should have done something sooner. Well, I couldn't agree more, but I was trying. I was in high school in 1962. I was so frightened by all the things that were going on and what had occurred in my life that I graduated in my junior year. It's really scary. Climate change is scary. But panicking and putting yourself in a financial bind and an emotional bind isn't going to help. Not a bit. I listened to Guy McPherson. I've been listening to Guy McPherson for about 17 years. His predictions 10, 12 years ago were that by this year, 2026, there wouldn't be any mammals alive anymore because the predictions having to do with what was going on with the Arctic, what was going on with methane gas. I mean, there's just so many aspects. The fact that trees are moving, I know that doesn't sound normal, but if you really, really study, remember, there's a lot of things over the years the government has tried to keep from you so that you don't panic. And you really have to research. Now, the way I'm a social scientist. I'm not an earth scientist, so I'll screw this up. But if you take the globe and you know the way that the air moves around, the air is changing. Supposedly Europe is going to become an ice age. I don't know. I mean, there are so many frightening reports that come out all the time about what's going on, but you really have to dig for them, especially in the United States now because so many things have changed regarding helping with climate change. But of course, as soon as FEMA and some of the other groups were changed, then we had the July 4th incident with the water that came down and killed a lot of people because they didn't know that the rain had occurred that was going to cause overflooding in an area in Texas. I believe it was Texas, don't hold me to that. But that was the 4th of July, this past 4th of July. And things have happened since then. And you've got to recognize that probably moving isn't going to help. It's probably not. We moved to Ecuador for fresh, clean air and fresh, clean water and organic food and lower altitude so that my husband could breathe and live longer, and he has. We've been here 12 years. We didn't expect, according to what the doctors were telling us, we didn't expect him to be here in a year or two. So it's been good for us. It's been right for us. But our reasons of moving were not about climate change. Our reasons for moving was about too high of an altitude in the home that we had in Mexico. We moved here for clean air, clean water, and a lower altitude. Okay? So make your choices wisely. And in the meantime, live your life. Do things you love. Close chapters on chapters of pain and aggravation, maybe a family member, maybe a neighbor, whatever it is. Work with the community. When things get tight, I mean, put in solar panels. You can't imagine what it feels like. I mean, we're in a foreign country. This is a developing country. We lose power a lot. We lose water a lot, too. We have backup water. We have 2 backup waters. We have backup food. We put food up. We put up rice and we put up lentils. Why? Well, you know, you can only do so much. But we're military kids. We're both from military. Well, I was a military child. My husband was a military serviceman. That's kind of what you do. Okay? Grow a garden. You know, do things that you enjoy. I love crocheting. I love gardening. And so that's what I do. And I try not to dwell on the issues. I try not to think about how many kids are concerned. And I'm hoping, and I know there's a lot of things that are out there now. There's books on stories to explain to kids what climate change is and how we really don't know about it. But and a lot of things have changed. Well, from 2100 now they're saying 2050, and there's some people are saying 2032. So we don't really know. We don't know. And in fact, about life, there's so much we just don't know. So live your life every day to the fullest. Do as many things as you can to enjoy life. Get along with your neighbors. Have community picnics or street park fun events, or know who your neighbors are. Watch out for each other. Be prepared for making changes in your life. Maybe taking in somebody who's had to immigrate because of climate change. I mean, there are just so many possibilities, but what we know is we don't know. And to dwell on it, there's nothing really you as an individual person can do. There are many people in the governments of many countries working on what is supposedly coming. Like for Y2K, they spent $300 to $600 billion changing the computers so that they could straighten that out. Maybe there's something they can do. There's been a lot of speculation about that. They've tried a lot of things already. They've tried to do a lot more things, but the fog is still there. The rain is still coming down more than usual. And the chickens seem to be objecting to the fact that I haven't fed them yet, because I really felt compelled to talk to you about this today. And I'm sorry to the chickens that they haven't been fed. And there's really not a lot more for me to say except take care of yourself. Get to know your neighbors and be prepared for whatever comes. Try to find out what you can do in your area, what you can expect to happen in your area, and what options you might have for, especially for water. Water is such a big deal. We have sanitizers where we can take dirty water and put the straw in it, and it goes through some things and you can drink it. Not a bad idea, because if something breaks, what happens here? When all the rains were coming down and the pavement was cracking, it was breaking water pipes everywhere because they just lay them on top of the ground here. It was breaking them all the time, and so we always have backup water. Besides the 2 big tanks, I have a whole bunch of little tanks, and I also have bottles of water. Not a bad idea. Maybe it's an overreaction, maybe not. Again, I was a military kid. I learned. I lived in Florida for a lot of years. We had the hurricanes in the fall where they tell you to fill the bathtub. So it doesn't seem unusual to me. If it seems unusual to you, just put 1 bottle of water aside. And if you don't ever use it, that's okay. It's not, you're not going to hurt anything. It's water. doesn't require refrigeration. Try to keep your sense of humor. That's very important. Try to keep your sense of humor. Things are changing, yes. We don't know what or how or when. We just know things are changing. Live every day to the fullest. That's the best information I can give you. That's what I do. And what I also do is I crochet. And my crocheting is on a website that I've put in my description. It's summerland-volunteer-artists.org, where it's a nonprofit group. And there's two of us who are now retired, and we didn't plan for retirement for a very obvious number of reasons. So I've created these little pins and also wall hangings just to remind people about climate change. Just to remind people. They're made of jewelry. I studied jewelry when it was gold and silver, but these are made of sustainable yarn to remind us. You can put it on your chest or your chair or your backpack or whatever, just to remind you that we need to do something, no matter how small, do something to try to reduce the impacts of climate change. That's all. Just something. So if you're interested, there's a description in the bottom below this. Shows you my location of my little. It also tells you about our nonprofit and what we've done over the years and how we've worked with children, because that's one of the things we've done. We've worked with children about all kinds of things to do with protecting the earth, including of odd things. That's because we were in Mexico. They didn't recognize that it was necessary to spay and neuter animals. So there's a lot of very, very unfortunate dogs and cats in Mexico. And so that's been quite a movement. It was a movement the entire time we lived there. We lived there for 6 years in Guanajuato. And we built a community center. We're at the beginning of the community center. It was finished later by other people. But we encouraged earth walkers, and that's a group they did. In fact, they've got another piece of land now where they teach the kids about respecting the earth. And you can do that. Take your grandchild by the hand and take them out. Take your child by the hand. Take your neighbor's kid by the hand and take them out for a walk in nature. Read the book called The Last Child in the Woods by Richard Love. That will help you understand how serious this situation is and how important it is that we address it, but not in a mode of panic, not in a mode of fear, in a mode of acceptance, of adapting, without losing our minds and spending so much money and moving and causing ourselves so much emotional stress and strain that in the end it's not worth what we've done. But just live every day to the fullest and respect the earth. Thank you.